punch. He didn't feel like it, so I said, I'm going to try and get it on tape here and take it home to you tonight. So, if Wynn doesn't mind, that shouldn't make you nervous. Plug this thing in here. Forgot how to run it. It's been in the attic for a long time.
Is it real upside down? Why no?
Sorry. Okay.
Well, President Jim and members of the Willoughby Historical Society and friends, what can I say? Here I am again. Those are not famous first words, for John Weiss used them in 1893 when he declared, slap bang, here I am again, with prices lower than ever at Weiss's Harness Emporium. Remember, these are lower prices than ever in the Niagara district. If you can drive 10 or 20 miles and save $5 or $10, it's worth your while. My motto is small profit and quick return. The many horses in the area contributed to the business of John Weiss in Stevensville and Willich in New Germany and Dilliard farther down on the Sodom Road. Your 1984 historical calendar shows a photo of the class of number 6 school, of which Jacob Lemon was the treasurer. In 1877, an auction was held at the late home of the late John Lemon in the township of Willoughby. Sold were a lot of farm stock and implements. 9 months' credit was extended without interest by supplying approved security, and the proprietress was Laura Lemon. There was another auction in 1877 in February at the St. John's Lutheran Parsonage. To be sold was 1 horse, 3 buggies, and all the household goods and furnishings belonging to the proprietor without reserve, as he was about to move to Pennsylvania. Again, 9 months credit was extended on sums over $5 without interest, or 8% off for cash. The Reverend Frederick C. Enger was the proprietor. The Reverend Enger was born in Germany in 1827. From 1874 to 1877, he was pastor of St. John's Lutheran Church. He organized 2 other churches and served in about 6 other congregations, Humberston, Shirkston, and Chippewa. Again, referring to your 1984 calendar, which shows a group photo of the parishioners of St. Joseph's Church with the caption, Parish Picnic 1924. The annual picnic in connection with St. Joseph's Church, New Germany, will be held in Kritz's Grove on Tuesday, August the 22nd, 1893. James Lowell, MP, William McCleary, MPP, Dr. Glasgow, James Lawson and others have been invited to give addresses. The grounds open at 10 o'clock, refreshments on the grounds, music by brass and string bands. They had a fine large platform for dancing. Admission was 25 cents, which admitted you also to the dancing platform, and children were admitted free. In 1880, parties wishing a good time were invited to attend the Willoughby Hotel on the Niagara River near Black Creek. They also had a dancing platform and swings. Boats and fishing tackle were available. Liquor and cigars were first class, and the charges were moderate. Before leaving Black Creek, should mention the carriage and blacksmith shop of Michael B. Barnhart. He was a manufacturer of all kinds of carriages, wagons, buggies, sleighs, and cutters, all of the latest styles and improvements, all work warranted, all kinds of blacksmithing with prices to suit the times. In 1882, Isaac H. Allen was paying cash for black ash, elm, and basswood bolts delivered on the Welland River or the canal feeder. Unfortunately, the mill burned 4 years later. A cattle show of the Willoughby Agricultural Society was held in Chippewa on Saturday, October the 27th, 1855. Premiums were awarded for teams of horses, carriage horses, saddle horses, yoke of oxen, colts, heifers, rams, ewes, also for wheat, oats, Indian corn, potatoes, and apples. John Usher was the president of the society, and the prizes were paid in pounds and pence. Well, everyone was wishing everyone a Happy New Year, so you know it's January and the start of a brand new year, of New Year's resolutions and intentions. One of the discussions at December's meeting concerned the manner of showing appreciation to those dedicated members who served beyond the norm. This reminded me that life is not measured by accumulation, but by outlay. Not by how much saved, but how much expended. Not by distances traveled, but by roads taken. Indians bent limbs of trees to designate the trail. Others blazed trees or piled rocks, followed the stream or walked the ridges or even followed the trail of the black walnut. What road would we take if we had to do it all over again? For me, it's been an interesting life. Hardship softened by love. Sadness and laughter to recall the joy of living. Unlike the notice that appeared in 1877, I will not be responsible for any debts contracted by that woman Catherine, who was lately my wife, but who is now a worthless character traveling in the States. That's strong language. Or of the husband who had his wife's gravestone to read, "Here lies my wife. She is at rest, and so am I. Or of the wife who added to her husband's stone, to be with you I'd be content if I only knew which way you went. Remember, there is no cure for birth or death save to enjoy the interval. In 1817, the entire township of Willoughby contained only 63 houses, inhabited houses, one school, and no church. In the subscription list of 1824, of 35 names contributing money and material for a school and meeting place, 21 of them were Mennonites. And of the 28 pounds that were collected, it took a quarter of that to purchase the stove. From 1825 to 1835, groups of people from Alsace and other districts of Germany settled in Willoughby and Bertie. They came by way of New York and proceeded on the flat-bottom boats on the Erie Canal drawn by horses and oxen to Buffalo. Mrs. Fox told me of an ancestor who was born in 1821 in what is now Welland. There were 15 families living in about a 5-mile stretch along the creek. And to reach Petersburg, or as you would say, Humberston, they would travel east on the creek to the Niagara River, up the river to the lake shore, and then to the lake shore to Humberston. Such was the wilderness and the swamp between Chippewa Creek and Lake Erie. When this man was a boy, a road was cut straight south through the swamp, but it could only be used in winter with sleighs. Visualize that the next time you travel on the Prince Charles Drive between Port Colborne and Welland. Immigrants to Canada from the States walked and walked and walked. They walked to Street's Mill with a bag of grain and walked back home again with a bag of flour. In 1874, a young man walked from Waynflete to Stevensville to visit his girlfriend. On other occasions, he stayed overnight with the girl's family, but this time he had to return home. And he started back on a long walk, and after several miles, he heard wolves howling. So he increased his pace. But the wolves were coming closer, and he realized they were on his trail, and he ran until he found a tree that he could climb. And there he remained until dawn, when the assembled wolves wandered away. His parents were greatly concerned about this when they heard about it. And soon after this, they were married. Is that understandable? Stevensville men employed in Niagara Falls, New York, and wishing to come home for the weekend would ride the Paddy Miles Express to Black Creek and walk from there to Stevensville. Heard of others who would walk to Welland and come home on the mail train at night. Even heard of one man who walked to Welland to get his girl a valentine and then walked home again. But I must give the prize for walking to the Reverend Adam Kiefer, a 60-year-old Lutheran minister who in 1849 walked from the Markham area to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, most of the way barefoot, with his shoes tied by their laces and slung around his neck. A father, mother, and their young son of about 5 years of age were walking up the Sodom Road from Chippewa. Cars went by them, but no one stopped to offer them a ride, until finally a Model T came chugging along, had a box in the back, stopped and offered them a lift. The mother rode in the cab with the driver, and the father and the son rode in the box in the back. The driver learned that the family were going to Stevensville, to her mother's place. And as his supper would be ready and waiting for him on his return to his home in New Germany, he insisted that the family should stay and share the meal with he and his family, which they did. And afterwards he drove them on into Stevensville. And that's what happened over 60 years ago. And the kindness and thoughtfulness of John Critz has not been forgotten by this family. People are health conscious these days. They diet, they take vitamins, they attend exercise classes, they walk and they jog. Told you of the family that put down 18 barrels of cider every November for their own health. If you had a thirst for hard cider, there was a place where you could go and get a pitcher of hard cider. The pitcher was never washed. It was always sticky. And so was the glass that they gave you to drink from. But after the first glass, you didn't care. In 1852, a distillery in Chippewa was turning out 2,000 gallons of whiskey per day. Where did it all go? You could buy it from your local storekeeper. Other residents of the township made wine, dandelion wine, rhubarb wine, elderberry wine, blackberry wine, raspberry, and even strawberry wine. And they tell me that there are more old drunkards than there are old doctors. Here are a few remedies you may remember. Several slices of onion were placed in a shallow dish, covered with brown sugar, and put in a warm place. The resulting liquid was then spoon-fed to a sick child. How about mustard plasters? Powdered mustard stirred with flour and vinegar. And if you didn't have any powdered mustard on hand, you could use red pepper and turpentine. But first, you should rub the chest to prevent blistering with axle grease. Did you know that spider webs were used on cuts and wounds? They were also used in the barn when dehorning cattle. You know, the young don't know what it is to be old, but the old remember what it was to be young. Youth would be an ideal state if it only came a little later in life. Those of German descent will remember the 3 Ks: church, children, and kitchen. Understanding was necessary then, and it is necessary now as it was when a husband dropped his wife's dress shoes out of the bedroom window to keep her at home. Or of the husband who always allowed his wife to have the top of his boiled egg for her breakfast. A farm lady thought she should be getting more eggs for the number of hens that she had laying, and she spoke to her husband about it, and, well, he thought maybe the skunks might be getting some of them. But this farm lady wasn't satisfied, and she scouted around, and she found a number of eggs hidden in a grain cleaning machine. Hard to understand how skunks could do that. A young lady, well, in her late 20s, a quiet, calm, easygoing lady, married a loud, bossy, outspoken man. Didn't seem like the ideal made in heaven marriage. After a year or so of marriage, the wife was asked by neighboring ladies if she would attend a church tea and workshop with them. She told her husband of the invitation, and he didn't say yes, and he didn't say no, and she knew he wasn't pleased, but she went anyway. And on her return later that afternoon of the tea and workshop, she noticed that someone had left the gate between the barn and the house open. And there was a trail of corn leading up to the open kitchen door, and the pigs had followed it. Being the calm, quiet, easygoing lady that she was, she cleaned up the mess and understood that a woman's place was in the home. Nothing was said of this incident by either party. Several months later, the husband was asked to work on a job that would require him to carry his lunch. He was a good worker, enjoyed his food and a good cup of tea. When noontime came, he joined the other men for the luncheon break, poured himself a cup of tea to cool, ate a sandwich, picked up his cup of tea and quickly drank and quickly spit it out and gagged. It was terrible. Somebody had put some liquid manure in his tea. And he knew who. And he also knew why. Nothing was said of this incident by either party, and they lived happily till death parted them many years later. Want to hear another understanding episode? A young couple about to be married were standing in the front of the church, and the clergyman had just reached that part of the ceremony when he said, "And if anyone here knows why this man and this woman should not be joined in holy matrimony, let him speak now or forever hold his peace." There was a pause, and then footsteps were heard coming up the aisle, and all eyes turned, including the bride and groom, to see who a young lady walking up the aisle with a baby in her arms. She walked until she stood beside the husband-to-be, and into his arms she placed the baby, turned and walked out of the church. Well, talk about your TV soap operas. How about that? The bride-to-be took the baby from her husband-to-be arms, turned to the clergyman and said, "Please continue." And so they were married, and they lived happily ever after. The baby was raised by the groom's parents, and she too, years later, married and lived happily ever after. The mother? Oh, the mother. Well, you know what they say on the TV soap operas. Tune in tomorrow. Gladys joins me in wishing you and yours all the very best in 1984. And remember, when the nights are cold and the days are hot, our parting will not be forgot. The pleasure of my mind shall be forever to remember thee. Thank you for listening.
Suppose we should bring him back up again, eh? Well, I'd like to, on behalf of those present, thank you very much, Win, for entertaining us here this evening. Certainly, I thought I had, could remember back many years, but you got way beyond me as far as history went. And, yeah, you think so?
I'll tell you, I can turn in your speech a long about what all you made me remember.
Well, that's the beauty of it. He can remember what he reads anyway, or what his experiences. It's really tremendous. But we don't want you, usually when it comes to our meetings here, and we're very pleased that he does, but he usually skips out on us here when we have lunch. We're early tonight. We're not going to let you out of here early at all tonight. You're going to have to stick around and visit a bit, and I don't know, maybe you and I can have a little conversation here in the kitchen after a while the others are having lunch, something like that. So don't want you to go. You'll keep me here, Gladys, will you, for a while? Yeah. Well, it's certainly tremendous to...
Well, I'd like to ask him about this hard cider. A neighbor of mine used to say, when they shovel all the apple sauce and put it through the line of the cider maker, when that nice oily finish on the top, that was the word of the